Hello and a warm welcome to Federal Special Program Capital Beat. US President Donald Trump's 2 day state visit to Beijing featured wide ranging talks on Taiwan, Iran, and trade with Chinese President Xi Jinping, but yielded few concrete outcomes on the issues dividing the world's two largest economies. Now, if you look at it in the terms of takeaways. Now, there was no breakthrough on Iran. Trump downplayed the need for China's help with Iran ahead of the trip, even as his aides said Beijing, a major buyer of Iranian oil, could play an influential role in brokering a path to ending a conflict. So, there's no breakthrough on Iran. Then, if you talk about Trump also touted the deals with Xi Jinping on Chinese purchases of farm goods, beef, and Boeing aircraft, but the details were not very graphic. In fact, the details were thin. He departed Beijing without extending a trade truce due to expire later this year. Markets were disappointed that a deal reported by Trump for China to buy 200 Boeing jets wasn't bigger, and traders said US soybean futures fell to their lowest level in more than 2 weeks on Friday after the summit failed to produce specific details for American farm goods. On major issues from expanding trade to artificial intelligence and Taiwan, the leaders appear to have made little progress beyond agreeing to disagree and perhaps to keep talking. So these were, we'll try and discuss as to what were the outcomes of Trump's China visit. Will Trump call it successful, or Xi Jinping will call it successful? Who set the tone? Was it Trump or was it Xi Jinping? There's going to be a debate maybe in the coming days also on that. But there's a picture which has gone viral today as Donald Trump was about to embark on Air Force One and he was leaving Beijing for America. There was a picture which went viral that just below the staircase of the aeroplane, there was a waste paper bin, and Donald Trump and his entire American delegation was seen to be discarding the burner phones, gadgets, pins, some commemorative items which China had gifted them. And they said that nothing Chinese will go on the Air Force One. In fact, one of the White House correspondents also had said that they were told not to carry anything from China. And of course, the fears were that maybe because of the espionage, they could be bugging of devices, so which is why they had to discard those gadgets and burner phones. So all that was graphically brought about, and that picture has gone viral today as Donald Trump was leaving Beijing. Now, Emily Gooden, who is the White House correspondent, look how she's described it. American staff took everything Chinese officials handed out, credentials, burner phones from White House staff, pins for delegation, collected them before we got on Air Force One and threw them in a bin at the bottom or at the stairs. Nothing from China allowed on the plane. We are taking off shortly for America. And this, look at the number of retweets Emily Gooden's tweet has got. When we are watching it, it's about 1.6K retweets it has got. And this tweet has gone viral, and people are talking about this particular picture where Trump and his delegation are seen discarding. Of course, that's a part of the protocol because this has not happened for the first time. If you remember in 2016, when Barack Obama was there, similar scenes were witnessed. And they keep the press and the security delegation on both sides really on the tenterhook. So we'll try and discuss this, but largely our discussion will be on the outcomes of Trump's China visit. Two people join us this evening. Joining me this evening is Professor Aftab Kamal Pasha, Middle East expert, international affairs expert and diplomat. So thank you so much for joining. Sanjay Kapoor, international affairs expert, author and veteran journalist, also joins us. Thank you so much. And let me begin with Sanjay about this picture which has gone viral. I want to talk to you about it. Though it's said that it's part of the protocol, but people are reveling over this picture where Trump and his delegation are seen discarding pins, burner phones. Now, is this something which is ordinarily and normally done by the American presidential team as part of the security when they travel to China? Is it done on every Trump's visit?
Thank you for inviting me to speak on this and to initiate the discussion. I think what has really happened now. This is a hyper communicating world where everything is seen with the with the hand glass. Everything is noticed. This is something not very unusual because I don't think China anything is trusted. They think China will bug everything possible, and they're very strong on surveillance. And the American government and the U.S. government, whatever you say, the Western world is deeply suspicious of whatever China does, and they have done that. In fact, if they threw everything in the bin, this is something that was expected. But the fact of the matter is now that it's being with so many hand cameras going around all over the world, everything is noticed. Everything is actually shown by individuals to the rest of the world as to what is really happening. So don't find anything unusual because I think U.S. believes, and U.S. especially when you have such a high-powered delegation comprising of all the possible 13 leaders of various companies who were there, plus many other diplomats who had accompanied President Trump to China. They fear that whatever information they could pick up, they could be put together and
Right.
give a big whole can be put together in terms of what is really happening. So I think China has not done anything. U.S. has not done anything unusual, and China was taking probably chances in trying to ensure that something get hooked into the United States Air Force One, and they could probably
Right.
listen to
I'll just
whatever
try
was
and
happening.
interrupt you here. There's a Grok post on this that people have been asking a lot of questions that why is it something extraordinary? So Grok says, yes, this is standard heightened security protocol for high-level US delegations visiting China. Strict OPSEC counters, advanced surveillance risks, personal devices are left behind, burners used, and Chinese issued items like gifts, badges, etc., are discarded to avoid bugs or malware. It's not routine for every trip, but routine for adversarial, high stakes ones like this. Yes, Sanjay.
So my contention is that this is just a distraction. This is not so important. What really happened in Beijing is far more important. You had President Trump who made a trip to the official residence, come the area where the all the leaders of China stay and talk with each other. This is very unusual that President Xi Jinping invited President Trump. He had not invited him in the past. I've forgotten the name of the place. It's very very exclusive, and whatever discussion may have taken place must be something that is not going to be revealed right away. It will start showing up much later. I'm sure there are some agreements that have taken place, otherwise the trip must not have taken place, would not have taken place. There is something that has been done, whether it is about 200 Boeing aircrafts or something more. Otherwise, how do you put together such a jamboree of diplomats, of business leaders and many others, if there's no promise at all? So I'm sure something has happened. We don't know what really is the outcome. We want to know about the Iran war, what happened to the Strait of Hormuz agreement, because that is where I think the fortunes of many countries really lie. The West is looking at it. India is also looking very hard at it. And I think we would come to know in the coming days what has really been decided between US and China, because that is a summit that really mattered, not the one which is back home took place, not a summit but a meeting of foreign ministers that took place in the last 2 days, which did not yield very much. So the summit between China and the US is where everything is linked to at the moment. So let's see what comes out of it.
Right. But Sanjay, another question to you, and then I go to Professor Pasha. That this particular trip, you would say that was it high on pageantry and less on policy? Was it high on vibes, less on details? How would you summarize this trip?
I don't think it was high on optics, as they would say, primarily because, this is a very, very important trip. There would not have been a possibility of getting everybody together. There was no promise of things not working out or not happening. The truth is that something has happened. And there were two things that were expected. One, China's intervention was required in the Strait of Hormuz. And secondly, US was supposed to give some kind of legitimacy to China as a superpower. That may not have been spelled, but in the coming days, it is possible that you might see more of some action that may be taking place. There is also a belief that instead of G7, the President of the United States of America may do something called G5, in which you may have Mr. Trump, you have the Russian president, and two couple of people more, and
True.
that would kind of eliminate all the others. So he's trying to make it a more exclusive club. So all these things really require some greater design
Right.
and let's see whether anything comes out of it.
Right. I'll come to Professor Pasha. In this 2 3 days of Donald Trump's visit to Beijing, who do you think set the tone of this entire visit, and what do you think are the major outcomes? Did China dominate, or did Trump dominate? Of course, when Trump gets back to Washington, he's going to speak highly about the success of the trip and how America dominated this entire narrative. But how will you assess this trip of Donald Trump to Beijing?
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. You see, since the very beginning, it is very clear that China has had an upper hand. The fact that the US president went to Beijing in itself shows that United States was keen to initiate a dialogue. Secondly, at the airport, one would have expected the Chinese president to receive the world's superpower president, but he was nowhere to be seen. Only the vice president and his junior colleagues were there to receive President Trump. So this was another indication. Thirdly, the top Chinese daily did not feature Trump's visit as a major headline. It was China's relations with Tajikistan and other sundry stories, and Trump's visit was pushed to the sidelines. The Chinese obviously were piqued by a series of steps which US has taken, starting from the tariffs which were pushed to 147%, and China threatening equivalent tariffs and restrictions on rare earth minerals, and I mean the kind of language exchanged on Taiwan about arms sales, and Trump's accusation that China was apparently supplying weapons to Iran. Whole host of issues dodged the relationship between the two. Uh, but eventually, I think Americans realized that uh, China is a hard nut to crack, and they are not going to relent on any of the key issues which made America virtually cave in. That prompted Trump to go and seek help from China on a number of issues. One was, the fact that he took a delegation of top American CEOs who, in one way or the other, are dependent on China. Whether it is Tesla's Elon Musk, whose Tesla depends for almost 28% of the spare parts, the key components which have to come from China, or the other CEOs who need critical inputs from China, which is essential for sustaining the American military industrial complex. So it was clear that China is holding an upper hand not only in the rare earth minerals but also in agriculture, in meat exports, so on and so forth. They have Chinese have agreed, of course, to buy soybeans, meat products, and other agriculture products, which they had deferred due to the imposition of tariffs, and instead they opted to buy from Argentina and Brazil and others. But as a show of goodwill gesture, they have relented and bought. But on key issues, the Chinese have stuck to their guns. One is they have said Taiwan is an internal matter, and any supply of weapons and support diplomatically to isolate Taiwan with the motherland China would be seen as hostile. So the result in the final statement, Taiwan did not figure at all, which is shocking to the Taiwanese government and to uh, Japan and South Korea, who hoped that Trump would uphold his
Right.
robust policy of supporting Taiwan's uh, autonomy, etc. And on nuclear issue, they seem to have
Also,
agreed, although the
so everybody was expecting that there's going to be a joint statement, but unlike in 2017, the leaders made no joint public statement to the media. They didn't release mutually agreed summaries of their meetings, nor a fact sheet detailing what came out of the talks. And China's public statements, which have been made, they have very little specific reference to purchase agreements or other commitments by Xi to the US. Now, what does that mean for this particular trip?
so it only means in diplomatic language that they agree to disagree. That there was no consensus on major issues, only some give and take was there, which Trump on social media has revealed. But overall, I think it was more give by the Trump and less by China, because if there was really reciprocity from China, the Americans would have revealed that publicly. The fact that after nearly a decade that an American president has gone to Beijing shows that the differences are really great, and it will take time or more forthcoming from the United States to accommodate rising China. You see, the Chinese have always, since Trump came to power in January last year, reminding America that they should treat China with respect, and that the way the language they have used is not acceptable. More than once, the Chinese foreign ministry spokesman has alluded to this point. And it is the same mistake they do with Iran, in a very contemptuous manner. They don't recognize that Iran is an important country and it has achieved what it has despite sanctions, and it's an old civilization. So they expect respect, which Trump doesn't seem to accord. The kind of abusive language he uses against heads of states and denigrates leaders, countries, peoples. That we will wipe out the civilization of China, Iran. They are like animals and so on and so forth. This is below, and Chinese have shown what China is. So in that way, they have uh, earned respect from a person who is not used to this kind of very humbled behavior, very boisterous person in behaving in a well-fashioned way is something new for
Right.
international
All right.
diplomacy.
Right. Let me come to Sanjay now. Sanjay, when also there are lots of talks about the strategic silence on Taiwan. That strategically, it seems Trump was silent on Taiwan. He didn't commit anything. Now, what is the major reason for that? And what does it go to show that Trump's silence on this particular issue has left many people guessing?
That is a major challenge because I think any kind of admission by US that they're willing to allow the sovereignty of China to prevail over Taiwan would suggest that the entire world order is being reordered. There are different hemispheres in which Mr. Trump is like to work, allowing Mr. Xi Jinping and China to have this the control or sovereignty over Asia and the area around that, and China and US will maintain Latin America and Western Europe as part of their control. But I don't think there is agreement at the moment, although there is quietly in the corridors of power, they will have suggestions that it's a matter of time when Taiwan succumbs to the pressure that China is putting and how US is looking the other way. And it might be a matter of, because if you not too long back, the leader of the opposition of Taiwan had visited China, which is very unusual. And the belief was that some kind of exercise is taking place between China and Taiwan, two countries, one
No, but
system.
certainly many times, a lot of people on the social media have been saying that Trump looked intimidated while he was sitting in Beijing. And normally he tries to, whenever he's making a speech or interacting with the leaders, he speaks profusely. He normally deviates also from the prepared remarks, and starts spinning yarns, starts giving advice, drops insults, tells jokes. But here, when we saw Donald Trump in Beijing, he almost stayed on a script which it almost seemed it was pre-written. Did we see Donald Trump holding himself back deliberately in Beijing?
Making a trip to Beijing is a tough exercise. Every head of nation, every country prepares very hard on that. There are too many advisors that go into telling the leader that they are backing, they should conduct themselves, because Chinese have a way of interpreting things that really can make things very difficult. So Trump stayed very close to the script. He did not want to take a step wrong so that he should not be misunderstood at all. So I'm not surprised, because whenever people go to China, especially those countries which are hostile, and we talk about US and maybe India for that matter, there is a great amount of preparation. People, experts are brought in, and they are the ones who tell them how exactly they should behave, how Xi Jinping is going to do. There is also a discussion about the handshake between Xi Jinping and Trump,
Yes.
whether Trump managed to squeeze his hand or not, or whether Xi Jinping stood his ground. So there
Hmm.
were many indicators that it was a very business-like meeting, and I'm sure I kind of disagree in some part with Dr. Pasha that something has happened between the two of them. It's not that such an important trip would not be limited to beef
Absolutely.
and a few more things. Sorry.
No, no, I'm saying that the stories which are coming on Reuters and CNN, a White House official apparently has said that Trump was eager to pull off this summit as a trip that improved the ties between China and America. But the Chinese Communist Party officials actually they are well known for not appreciating surprises during their highly choreographed events. So was that the reason that why he held himself back, and he wasn't sure that if he speaks profusely, then it might backfire in China?
Needle, let's not go by what is reported at the moment, because there's too much of spin doctoring that takes place at the moment. Too
Okay.
many trial balloons are being floated at the moment to figure out which way the entire proceedings took place. This is not exactly how it may have happened. These are stories which are planted in friendly press about, or not so friendly press, depending upon which side of the divide you are in, and they continue to be there till the time you start seeing the results very soon. The questions that need to be asked is whether what will happen to the Strait of Hormuz, what happens to the rare earth. Do you think there could be some kind of agreement that has transpired between US and China or not? If these two things have happened, then we have to understand, because despite China not liking anything, US has merely gone about doing whatever. I mean, I'm sure President Xi Jinping and China opposed the kidnapping of Maduro and changing the way the Venezuela conducted itself, or even
Yes.
for that matter, even Iran. They have expressed their opposition quite a bit, but didn't stop the US from doing whatever they did. So there is a limit beyond which China doesn't want to go, and it's all right to say that China has become a big power, but for long years they practiced something called 20 years of harmony with the world, because they did not want to fight with the US. So they understand China. China knows its limitations. China also knows that US is a very powerful country and it causes a great amount of harm,
Absolutely.
and they want to carry on for some more time before they are, confident enough, strong enough to take China or US on. But that is not
Right.
going to happen anytime soon.
Absolutely. Now, Professor Pasha, I'm coming to you with the toughest question. Now, Trump arrives back in the US and he's going to face the same political quagmire that has been dogging him before the trip. He has to again face the questions related to gas price, high inflation, then voter anger. Now, and President Donald Trump badly needed a win as his administration is struggling to contain those political and economic fallout which he has seen arising out of the war in Iran. Now, how is President Trump now going to answer those questions when he's back to Washington?
You see, I don't think President Trump's problems uh, would have immediate solution after he gets back to work in White House, because the oil prices continue to remain over 100. There's no sign of easing or coming down to less, unless there is uh, agreement on the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. And China has only mentioned that it should be opened. It could be interpreted that they don't want the Americans to impose a blockade. They have not identified the fact that it was made during his visit. I interpret that as aimed at America, that you have started this war. Already the Chinese have called this as illegal war and in violation of international law. And the fact that they said this should be opened during Trump's visit there, it is aimed basically at the United States. Uh, they did not mention so much when Abbas Arachi was there a few days ago in Beijing. So in that way, the Americans have to take a call whether to open the Strait of Hormuz, because today about 25 ships were allowed to go. Most of them were Chinese oil and gas tankers. So it's a signal that the Chinese, the American visit to Beijing is seen as positive by the Iranians, and they have let go these Chinese ship after the foreign ministry intervened on this issue. So in that way, it is selective permission given to ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and this is not going to ease the American uh, oil gasoline prices, which remain high, and Americans are paying a high price, and associated with this is the inflation, which has crossed
But
3.6.
Professor Partha, what happens to that dream coming together of the G2 from this trip now that it has ended? Would you see that the G2 formation looks concretized, looks successful, or we are in a position to say that nothing of that sort has actually taken place? At least the chemistry doesn't show that.
Yeah, it may not show publicly, but what is the alternative? These two powers have the capability to shape the international events, and the fact that President Trump did not at all mention Taiwan during his entire trip shows that they accept the Chinese point of view that the $11 billion arms they were planning to sell to Formosa will not be done under the new circumstances, and that Japan, Korea, and others have to realize that there is a new equation between China and the United States. See, the fact that he made the chips company who he was there, and that America has allowed China to import near the chips, where President Trump also has a share in that company, shows that he can go beyond his rhetoric of safeguarding national security. And when it comes to bilateral relations to strengthen ties with China, he can bypass that also. And there are many other issues. Perhaps we will get to know soon, where both of them have uh, perhaps arrived at on key hotspots, whether it is Gulf or other issues. So in that way, it will be too early to comment that this G2 is not taking shape. I firmly believe that the world is heading towards this G2 kind of a sphere of influence, and this will only accelerate and strengthen. And
Right.
there is no other alternative for the United States, because China, Russia is not equivalent, and there is nowhere equivalent power, whether it is Canada or West Europe or a combination of NATO countries. So
Right.
these two countries are likely to shape the developments, economic, political,
Right.
strategic, defense, and other issues.
Right. One quick question before I wind up the interview, Sanjay, to you: that how will India view this trip of Donald Trump to China? India will be a worried nation, or India will just keep a close watch as to what's happening, because India is already tilted towards America. So, how does India view this trip?
India is
So
going to
far,
view it
I
with
haven't seen
great.
any reaction coming in from the MEA. Yes.
India would watch it with great suspicion. They would be, in fact, worried about what has been the outcome of the visit. They would be expecting a briefing from the State Department about this. They would be expecting a lot more things that any ally of the United States of America would be expecting. And if they don't get it, they'll be more worried. But their worry has increased primarily because the Strait of Hormuz is something that really locks up their ability to get cheap oil. And if they can't get it, their turmoil in the country increases quite a bit because since yesterday, the 3 rupees have been increased in the oil prices in India. And this is bound to get worse if there's no agreement taking place between the two countries. So I'm
Right.
sure this is a cause of major concern for India, and they would be watching it very closely.
Right. And like you rightly said in your earlier submission, that a lot of spin doctoring is happening on both sides from Washington and from Beijing. But once Donald Trump reaches Washington, we'll have to wait and watch what kind of statements come from White House, and also on Beijing side, what kind of statements come in. And we'll have to wait and see. Thank you so much. We'll have to end it here. Professor Pasha, Sanjay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.